Favorite movie and why?
So the favorite movie and why, what comes to mind is The Matrix, right? Probably just the first one. Great. Oh my God, man. This was like, so I will say this quote I heard online somewhere. No one is woke, right? People just have like woke activities. So the more like woke activities you do, like meditate or, exercise to actually sweat, there's certain things that happen to you on a like metabolic level, chemical level that I want to tap into, right? And The Matrix was kind of showing me that there is a side, they're living an entire world inside of their head, right? And we're all kind of living in our own heads, if you would, right? So, and not to put my tinfoil hat on, but there's no telling if we're in the Matrix right now, right?
Right.
Because our brains are so dynamic and so on and so forth, right? And some scientists would say that we are in a dimension of many and all these different types of things. So The Matrix was that first eye-opener to me, just being a kid and like not knowing anything about an experience outside of what I can see, hear, and touch. And they're creating this entire, dual world reality where it's like, they talked in so many points. One of the main points I really like about that movie was the people turning into the agents.
Yeah. Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast, and this is maybe our most exciting episode ever. One, because we're in the brand new studio that we just built out in Henderson, Nevada, right outside of Las Vegas, and we were just making a joke with my new buddy that we had to spend about $10,000 so that I could have an indoor, air-conditioned, heated room where we could actually smoke cigars and enjoy ourselves during the frigid cold of the desert and during the 118-degree summer. So this whole year in 2024, we're going to be doing a lot more podcasts centered around finance, business, real estate, mortgage, basically so that I can feel comfortable sending out the podcast to our entire database of realtors and clients and loan officers. And kind of weird if I send all those people a podcast of me interviewing an OnlyFans gal or a crossdresser or somebody with some really strong libertarian opinions. So this whole year, we're going to focus a little bit more on business. And ironically, when I put the word out there on Instagram, on Facebook, and I was like, hey, I want to interview some interesting people that work in the business world, the real estate, the finance, the mortgage industry, that have interesting backstories. One of my buddies from Jiu Jitsu responded. He's like, hey man, I don't know if you know this, but I'm an MMA fighter. I've got my first fight coming up here in February, and I'm also an enrolled agent, tax preparer. So it might be like a perfect time. We can talk about my upcoming fight. We can talk about the fact that tax time is coming up. This episode will be dropping in January of 2024. So perfect time to get some financial news and tax planning ideas. And I'm going to screw up the name. This is the weird thing about jiu-jitsu. There are guys who I would trust with my children, and I don't know their first name. Because you go to jiu-jitsu, there's no name tags. You roll, you're in this super intimate setting, and then you realize like, oh, I'm really good friends with this dude. I would totally trust him with my children, have no clue what his first name is. And so when I was asking you, I was like, hey, what is your first name? You're like, well, this is going to be a tough one. And it's Hadxian or Hadxian. And this is spelled Hadxian. So the first thing I thought of was like all those Aztec names that are spelled with an X, like Ciclali and all these other names that I grew up with in Southern California. But you are not of Aztec origin, I'm guessing, because you're from the island of Trinidad. So first of all, give us the background on the name. Give us the background on how do you get from Trinidad to Vegas. And then let's jump into like your business philosophy, your personal philosophy, how it is you can balance this. I work with spreadsheets, but I like getting punched in the face for a living. Like something interesting is in that brain of yours, and I want to get to it. So thanks. Welcome to the podcast. Tell us about the name. Tell us from coming from Trinidad. Like, what do we have to know about you?
Yeah. Well, first, it's an honor to be here. I saw your Instagram, and you know how we roll. So it's funny. We all have different careers, and sometimes you talk to someone, like you were saying, we are very, rolling around. You might tell you my name, but maybe I got 10 names that day because I roll with 10 different people. But I pretty much see you every Sunday.
Yeah, like I've drank your sweat and I don't know your first name. That's a weird dynamic, right?
Exactly. So to get to the name, it's a pretty interesting story, actually. My father in Trinidad, right before I was born, he had a dream. And the teacher were more or less hitting him with a ruler in his hand and saying, you have to spell this word. And when he woke up, this was the word he had to spell. So he thought, obviously this name was given to me for that reason.
Nice.
So,
Here, let's move your mic up just a little bit closer. Yeah. It's kind of
Move it like that?
Yeah, move it up a little bit, just closer to your mouth so that we get better voice. Oh, and by the way, I'm making you smoke your first cigar like 2 weeks out or a month and a half out from your first fight. So hopefully this doesn't ruin your cardio. But yeah, it's kind of weird. You can just kind of jiggle it up. Yeah, just if it comes right up here like below your chin, we're in better shape. Okay. And Chris, if we're not getting great sound, maybe you can come adjust it.
Yeah, the stands can be totally manhandled.
Yeah. Okay, you don't have to unscrew it. Just throw them around. They're bass drum stands.
A little better?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just to reiterate, he had a dream about the name. He had to spell it for the teacher, and when he woke up, he decided to name me that name. So you know how dreams work. Maybe he added a letter, forgot a letter, we don't know, but that's what stuck. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, very interesting.
And for those in the audience, not myself, of course, but those in the audience who are geographically ignorant, where is Trinidad?
So Trinidad's in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So it's a fun place. It's actually a really small island, but it is pretty much like, for me, it's very popular. So especially with music, we have like soca and things like that. A lot of countries down there do it, but we have the carnival and things like that where people get dressed up and, it's party. So.
And what is it like immigrating from there to here? Do we have like favored nation status with them, or is it a U.S. territory like Guam or something like that?
So it's nothing like Guam where it's a territory, but we are like, we take the U.S. currency and we're aligned with them for most things. So they speak English down there, all that. So very much aligned.
Got it. Do you speak any other languages, or is it just English?
Just English.
Okay. So what is it like immigrate? Well, first of all, why America? And second of all, why Vegas? Like, this is the least tropical island location in all of America. Like, you couldn't have picked a worse place if you're used to the ocean and tropical climate.
100%. You'd be surprised how amazing. I mean, the West Coast compared, not Vegas in particular because it's a desert, but the West Coast is great. So long story short, my mom moved here trying to get a better future for us, and so I can go to college and things of that nature. But pretty much I went to New Jersey, lived there for like 14 years, moved to PA for 2 years, moved to California for 3 years, and then moved to Las Vegas pretty much to do jiu-jitsu. So it's been a long road, but I want to live in all the interesting places. So I still want to go to Florida and Texas. And then after that, I might even live outside the country. So I'm all about trying to find, there's certain places in America that are lit.
Right.
I want to see what those atmospheres are.
Well, you're done now because you just told me you have a kid, so it's all over. Like you can't do anything fun. Now it's all going to be about like where's the best softball team.
Exactly.
I'm always interested in this because I grew up in LA where a lot of people were trying to move to LA. And I remember talking to people who maybe didn't make quite enough money to get ahead in LA. And I'm like, hey, I remember offering one of my buddies. He was pretty broke. He was in a rough spot. And I was like, hey, I don't have a job for you, but I can get you a job in Phoenix, Arizona, where, by the way, you can rent a house for $1,000 a month instead of $4,000 a month. And I can get you probably a $50,000, $60,000 job. You can kind of start over there. And the idea of his head in moving like 4 hours away to Phoenix, Arizona was crazy, and there's not a whole lot of cultural difference between, middle class families in LA and middle class families in Arizona. So I'm like, why this hesitancy to like move to make a better life for yourself? And then I hear all the time from people that come from Trinidad, from Ghana, from the Philippines, who are just like, oh yeah, we just picked up and left, and that was it because we thought there might be a better chance. So we came to America with $1,200, and we said, we'll just, we'll give it a shot. So what was the mentality of your mom, or how old were you, or how bad is it economically in Trinidad that she just picked up and like, yep, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia is the place to go?
Yeah, it's funny. I started off in New Jersey.
Okay, even worse than Philadelphia.
The property taxes. But I think for a lot of people, it's just where you have family or connection. So we had people already living there, so that's why we first chose New Jersey. But opportunity-wise, the opportunity is dramatic. So you could still have a good life for yourself. Like, honestly, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, part of me wants to retire in Trinidad. The pace is so slow, and people. It's not a hustle and bustle, right? Here, it's like every man for themselves. It's just a different mentality of living. It's almost like when you're there, you're on vacation. The amount of vacation days they get a year is like triple what we get. right? So just like simple stuff like that. The pace is different. But to be completely honest, when I was a kid, they would tell stories about America that was like so crazy. You know, you see, it would be like they leave money on the streets, which is true.
Right.
There's quarters and pennies on the ground. But these concepts are not really concepts we deal with. If you see money, you pick it up. Like money's a valuable thing to us. So the idea of where someone would tell you as a kid, there's just money laying on the ground. And it's technically true, right?
Right.
There's homeless people just taking money as a job, right?
Right.
So it's so affluent that even the homeless people, when you follow them, sometimes they end up being rich.
Right. And shout out to my buddy Barry Habib in the mortgage industry who wrote a book called Money in the Streets, because it's about his mom and dad immigrating here and like just taking a shot at, a better life for their kids. And he's done that. And now he's done that for his kids. So it is funny because like that saying, oh yeah, there's money in the streets in America. Well, yeah, there is actually. There's a lot of homeless people begging for money and you'll find a court on the street. But like, did your mom find better opportunity here? Was she able to create a better life for you or your siblings or?
Way better opportunity. I mean, the thing is like in Trinidad, you can still get a job and you can support your family. But in America, you can get 3 jobs. You know what I mean? You get a day shift, you get a night shift, and then you could like do something remotely.
Right.
So the opportunity is definitely, everyone here is of the mindset of you got to make that dollar, right? There is a time money exchange value here system that will say stay up late at night during tax season to get this done because time is money. People don't want to file extensions. Everyone gets it done this time. You got to put that time in, right? So there's definitely, I think the mindset is different in the culture. And that's where the money comes from. If the opportunity, even if it's not money, there's always an opportunity. Someone hiring someone, you could start a business. Yeah. Right.
So this is really interesting to me, right? Because if you talk to, who do I want to pick on here? I won't say their name, but I'll pick on one of my friends who I argue with about politics all the time on Instagram. And if she was hearing this conversation, she would hear, the way she would interpret this is, this is a tragedy that to get ahead in America, you have to work 3 jobs. And why should you have to work, at night just to get ahead and make extra money, and et cetera, all the negative things about capitalism, which I get it. Like I don't have completely rose-colored glasses on. Capitalism does create some problems, but it's interesting to hear from somebody who came from like a slower pace of life is like, oh yeah, I'd love to retire in Trinidad. It's a lovely place to retire. But no, I want to be here right now working 3 jobs and you were on a sales call on the way in here and then you're trying to build a pro fight career and then you're preparing taxes. Like, why is that encouraging instead of discouraging for you specifically?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like perspective, I think, right? And that's kind of one of the things I want to talk about. We all have information, but that information is surrounded by perspective. And if you have a background or an experience where, let's say, maybe your parents had one job and they were able to pay that mortgage and still be home and take care of the kids and so on and so forth, then you expect that to be your reality when you grow up. And the economy does change and things can get better, they could get worse, right? Maybe for our kids, like my parents were working 3 jobs, I'm only working 1. Hopefully it goes in that direction for them.
Right.
But that is kind of what I wouldn't even say capitalism, that's the reality of things, right? Things change. So if that's your reality that you're coming from, a perspective, then you're saying things are getting worse and I shouldn't have to do this. This isn't the norm or expectation that I had for this outcome. And it's kind of funny that I was talking to my mom about this last night. My mom's in town for Christmas and holidays, and mostly to see my grandkid, but her grandkid.
Of course, I can just tell you right now, you don't mean shit anymore. Right? Now that your mom has a grandkid, you mean about this much, and your grandkid, your son or daughter?
Daughter.
Your daughter means like this much, and all of a sudden you'll be looking at your mom being like, wait a minute, you never did that for me. Why are you doing that for my baby? And it's like it's a different world, man.
100%.
Congratulations, welcome to the club.
Thank you so much. It's been very renewing in so many ways. But I was just talking to her about perspective, and I learned this lesson in college, right? Like I played football and I went to college doing that. But the thing I learned in college is like in high school, I didn't need to do homework, right? Like I was smart enough to like watch. I was into school as well, right? So I would see what the teacher did on the board, take a few notes, pass the test, right? That's fine. In college, doing counting was a little different. I realized that I needed at least like 2 hours of studying outside of class to understand what the teacher was talking about per that class. So if I'm taking like 6 classes, that's like 12 hours of studying. So this idea of like leaving class and having to actually put in additional work, as well as, football practice and, the girls and activities and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I realized like, okay, I need to actually carve out this much time for studying only, or to, get that going. So it's a perspective thing where you realize, I think some people get to the point where they see that, the 6 hours, and they'll say to themselves, just to reference what you're saying with the friend, right? Just a perspective, that's too much work. I'm not going to do that, right? And some people say, if I need to study this 2 hours, I'm going to do 3 hours because I want an A, right? So it's really just when you see the amount of work that is needed to accomplish whatever the goal that you have to say the perspective of, I'm willing to do that and more. And if that's not the result, you need to find a different avenue, right? If that's not your mental space because I'm not like that with everything. There's some things that I'm not perfect, right? I have certain weaknesses in my perspectives as well. And when I see what this is, the workload versus the result, I'm like, I don't even care to go down there, right?
Right.
So for example, Jiu Jitsu has been fun for me. So I don't mind putting in the work to get the results. I don't just do it for the results. I actually enjoy doing Jiu Jitsu itself. So the work is almost easy, even though I'm sweating and it's hard, because to me, this is fun, right? This is like a cool activity that when I was watching karate movies as a kid, this is what I want to do.
Right.
So just to go back to the financial edge of it, I think it's just, and not to discourage, I know the average person has to work the 9-to-5 job, but sometimes you can go and find a different avenue to raise your income where you can have one job. And I'll just end here by saying that, in response to that particular question, I went to school for about 6.5 years. I got 2 degrees, of accounting degree and a finance degree. And then when I started working in New York, Manhattan, Empire State Building, which was a pretty interesting experience, there was a person next to me that was 18, and he passed the enrolled agent exam, didn't have any degrees, and he was able to do tax returns for pay, and I had to work an analyst job. So I did everything by the book, right? What you're supposed to do, put in all the time, had the grades, got the degrees, and there was someone 4 or 5 years younger than me getting paid more than me and doing more because he found a different avenue to get there. Mm-hmm. So he looked at my work and said, 12 hours of studying plus classes and paying, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take this $500 exam.
Maybe a little bit better return on investment there for that guy.
So, given in his respect, he was actually still going to school at the time to get the same degrees I was going to get, but he completely circumvented and fast forwarded his track to where he had to go. So to go back to that perspective of that question, I think it's like you have to figure out where you want to get to. I want to work a certain amount of hours to get a certain amount of pay so I can live a certain lifestyle. What are all the professions that would give me that? Right. And if all the professions you're qualified for are just working time for money, translation, then that's going to be, you can still try to find a good time for money. But everything that is behind the paywall is a certificate. So you need either a degree, you need a certificate like he got the enrolled agent, whether it's pool cleaning or something, anything that has a certificate behind it. For example, lawn care is a booming business, but there's no certificate behind it. So there's going to be a lot of competition. Your pay grade is going to be dramatically lower than something behind a certificate paywall. Might only be $300 and some studying to get that. But that's what I think the perspective is. Trying to get to that same result, but with just different angles and avenues, right? How do you don't stick to like, oh, I have to do this and quit on it. Okay, I want to get that, but where's the different ways I can get to that same, end point? And then pick something that you're going to be, I can do that. If that's not the energy, you don't want to be doing it.
I love that, man. I want to, first of all, I want to remind everybody in the audience that Accounting 101 at Pasadena City College is the class that made me drop out of college because I was working at a bank where it's like, banking is simple plus and minuses, and that's what it is. And then accounting is like backwards, like a debit is a credit or a plus. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't. So then I just quit college.
It literally is backwards to the language of the bank.
Yeah, 100%. So I was trying to do banking during the day and then accounting at night, and I just felt like such a moron. So that made me quit college. So F accounting. But I'm glad you do it. And the very little bit I know about you, I'm going to take a wild guess because I want to pull at this thread a little bit on this time for money. I would guess you have your standard job, quote unquote, as an enrolled agent, preparing taxes, et cetera, and that is a time for money exchange, right? Like you evaluate Scott Groves' finances and my P&L and try to find some tax breaks, et cetera, and I pay you a fee for the amount of work you do. And then On the extreme low side of exchange for money, I know you're training your ass off, fighting, punching, jujitsuing, cardiovascular weights to fight in a fight where you're going to get zero money because there's zero money for amateurs. So your time exchange for money there is like a net negative. To the infinite degree. But then I'm going to also guess, just the little bit I know about you, that you've probably got some side hustle or business concept or something you're working on where it's like, hey, eventually this will become the thing that like I have to put very little time into and will give me a lot of money in return. Is this assessment of you fair?
Yeah, that's a very fair assessment. Not to like put all my cards on the table, but 100%. I think that, you know, I just to clarify with the fighting, no ambitions of making money doing this.
you just want to get punched in the face for free? That's a good plan.
I want to get punched in the face for free, right? So,
okay, good for you.
So I'll go into the fighting and why I'm fighting in a little bit.
Okay.
But the answer, just to follow up with this question, time for money. Yes, so that's a negative. I'm paying gym memberships, you know,
yeah,
medical bills. I dislocated a shoulder. So you name it, right?
And how many hours a week are you training? Because I mean, I see you at Open Mat. I see your Instagram stories. I know in a couple of threads we're in, you're training several times a week. Like you're putting 10, 15 hours a week maybe into this?
Yeah, maybe. Probably like closer to 20 hours a week, which is kind of crazy. So
right.
I have a lovely wife that's helping me.
So I'm going to put
this.
net negative 20 hours a week.
Right? And, you know, that would be a good week. So I'm actually, the best part about fighting is that I'm actually I'm taking it even more serious now. So I'm at a bigger negative, right? But you know, like sometimes that's a good point. When you're starting a company, sometimes you need to invest. I'm not trying to really make money from this, but sometimes your first year or two, it's a net negative. Right. And you look at that and smile because you know where you're going, right? But I'm putting in way too many hours into this, and it's just, I'm lucky that my wife allows me to indulge. I don't have too many hobbies just now that we're moved to a new place and everything. So I'm completely involved with it. But I do have a couple other side ventures that I've tried. The ideal for me is actually to be able to invent something or not really invent something, but create a process. So a lot of people are stuck on invention. Like I have to create something new. But really where you really make the money is not the person that invents the idea, but the person that finds a way to implement it, right? So it's like, I have accounting knowledge, just to give a simple example. The version of me building an app that gives this information to people for free in a language that they can understand. Because you know all the tax information is free. You can go to IRS website. Right. You don't need me.
I mean, it's this much.
Exactly.
It's like, I can't do that because I can't even read it, but exactly. It's a lot of information.
So the ability to take that complex information and put it in everyday language, for example, just a basic example, would be something that's valuable. So I'm creating a process where maybe you can like type in a keyword on a particular type of tax you're looking for, and it will take you to multiple references from the IRS website, this public information, showing you summary of information. Oh, this is what this page is saying. This is what this entire 3-page article is saying. If you want specific keywords of each, you know, it's almost like when you have the ChatGPT and it gives you like a paragraph of a summary.
Right.
And each line can be clickable to the context or the space in that you know, big index that you're actually looking for. So that's just a simple idea of how someone can create knowledge and create a process around it where you're bringing people to it. Because so many people have, like, I think, expertise,
right?
But they just don't have a way of bringing it to the masses. They think, oh, let me just open an account and share it, right? That's very limited in a way. So it's, you want to kind of create a process, and then everyone that's trying to do the same thing will say, this is a process I want to use.
Yeah.
You know, so you just bringing people to everyone's searching for the same things. This endpoints are the same. Can you create a process that gets someone to that endpoint faster? Yeah. You know?
Yeah, one of the wealthiest guys in mortgage is this guy named Matt Ishbia, and he started a company called UWM, United Wholesale Mortgage, and he recently just cashed out, went public, and bought the Suns basketball team. So this guy is wealthy, like I think with $1 billion. And Chris, maybe you can look that up, Matt Ishbia. I think he's a legit billionaire. And by the way, he sells the same exact effing mortgage product that everybody else does, right? They're a wholesaler of mortgages, but what he did was he just really refined the process. He made the process super easy. He made it super accessible for small independent brokerages that own their own mortgage company. And he didn't do anything special. He just took all the pieces on the chessboard and he just made a more efficient way to get to checkmate. And now he's a billionaire. Right. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty sharp. What does it say, Chris?
8.3.
$8.3 billion?
8.3.
Oh, wow.
Holy shit, Matt.
So we're talking money here.
And you know what's crazy? 10 years ago, I probably got some complaints about the guy because of how some of his business practices, but 8-10 years ago, that guy was like at a small booth about the size of our podcast table, like trying to sling loans at conventions and stuff. So good on him. Like
43 years old.
43 years old. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I am a piece of shit. I have failed miserably.
You're just taking the wrong path, right?
Yeah.
So now we're discussing it, and it's funny that it's funny when we talk about things like this, and that's why you were talking about what we want to talk about, and I said perspective is like a big thing I want to mention, is because you already know this, right? I reference it, and you're like, yeah, I know a guy like that, right? So we have this intrinsic knowledge in us, and sometimes just putting it to paper and saying, I'm going to be the one that create the process, right? You're walking around and you're saying, where can this process be a little better, right? It's so.
Hey, this quick interruption is brought to you by me, Scott Groves, the host of the On the Edge podcast. This podcast is brought to you by me. I'm a loan officer who can help you with a mortgage in all 50 states across the United States. I also coach loan officers. So if you are a home buyer who's looking to get a mortgage, if you're a realtor who's looking to partner with an awesome loan officer, or if you're a loan officer looking for coaching, get in touch with me. It's those sources of revenue that allow us to produce this podcast and get out a new episode to you every week for the last couple of years. So if you're looking for a mortgage, if you're looking for a mortgage lender to partner with, or you're looking for a mortgage coach, I'm your guy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Once you become that kind of person, you're looking to create processes and ways to, it's almost like in Jiu Jitsu, it's like the perfect example of this. We can all get to the same submission, but who can get there the fastest with the least resistance? And that's the pathway you really want to take, right?
Yeah.
If I can go do it a way where you can't stop me from doing it,
right.
That's the one way I'm always going to take.
Right.
I don't want to take the fast way, the hard way, the strong way. So in life, and that's why I love Jiu Jitsu so much, because it's almost like there's an answer to each puzzle piece. Right, it's almost like every submission has a defense,
right.
So, or maybe multiple defenses, right? So creating these processes is just, I think that's what really the value is. And if you can create a process in your own life to circumvent something or speed something up, that's where money is. Even though we look at Shark Tank, right? One of my favorite shows.
Right.
And a lot of times these people are just sitting at home seeing something already and saying, wouldn't it be cool if it just worked this way? If it was a little quicker to it, right? So, you look at one of my favorite examples, I haven't bought it yet, as you can tell, but the shaver that like catches your beard, right?
Yeah.
So we all know there's a process. You take out your tools, you shave your beard, then you clean up. And this company, whether they do it well or not, they're saying you don't have to clean up. This process, we just made it a little easier for you by having a vacuum within the shaver, right?
Yes.
So now that idea and that patent is like probably $1 million patent or something, because it's who wants to clean up after, right?
Well, and this will save about 100,000 marital fights a month, right? Because like the only time my wife gets frustrated with me when she's like, "Really, you couldn't rinse out the whole sink?" And I'm like, "I thought I got it all." She's like, "No, there's like little hairs everywhere." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." So like, I would buy a $400 razor with a vacuum just to avoid frustrating my wife, right? It's totally worth it. So talk to me a little bit about, obviously you excelled in school, you did a lot of college. Why tax preparation, right? Like, you mentioned, you work in New York. I feel like all the smart kids try to go to a hedge fund or something like that. Like what was it about taxes that interests you, especially since, you didn't, well, how old were you when you came to America?
I was 14.
14. So like you didn't have these early years, it's not like your mom and dad were sitting at the table staring at a tax bill when you were 8 years old, taking all the grocery money or something. That's what I think of when I think about people that go into tax preparation. So what was it about the field or the nuance of it? What attracted you to tax preparation?
That's a good question. I'll tell you why I'll tell you what attracted me to it, but I'll tell you what I love about it as well. This is a more important conversation to me. So to me, it was a couple of things. I really wanted to be an electrical engineer, to be completely honest with you. And as a kid, I was always take things apart and try to open them up and see how they work. Like, okay, thanks for the electric car for Christmas.
Right?
But how is this wirelessly connecting to this thing? Right? Like, what's going on? So I wanted to get into that. Unfortunately, the school I went to for football didn't have that program. So I got accepted to 2 schools, and it was kind of a financial thing. New Mexico State, I could have went there for football as well, but they weren't giving me any scholarships or anything like that. And this William Patterson University was giving me some financial aid there. So I looked through all their stuff, and accounting, they had a really good accounting department. So I just really went, I said, what's this school have to offer? The two best things they had was nursing and accounting. So I didn't just pick, I picked based on their strength.
Yeah.
And their business school was great. So accounting was hard, but I always want a challenge, right? Like I'm always like, let's see how hard it is. So it was hard enough that I needed to study a lot to do it. But long story short, it was just based on that was the best option that school offered. So I took an offer there. And then when you do accounting, what people don't understand is like accounting is like one of the broadest fields there is. There's financial accounting, there's actual taxation, there's auditing. There's so many different facets to accounting, inventory management. If there's numbers involved, accounting is involved, right? When you guys are budgeting, you may not have like a CFO, maybe one of you guys wear the hats, but all those activities are technically, accounting. So I didn't want to do taxation at all, just because taxation is one of those things where there's always changes, right? So like most other accounting degrees or careers that you go into, you get nuances, but you become an expert, you stay an expert.
Right.
Accounting is the kind of thing, well, the Congress just voted this in, and you have like 10 days to read this before it's due and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But we can actually talk about something like that that's just coming out now that I think is really big for most businesses, and it's very prevalent to 2024. But there is, I think it's a beneficiary report that needs to be filed annually now, that they're making every business owner file, right? So it's kind of a big deal. But long story short, there's like so much documentation to read, so no one wants to go into taxation, right?
Right.
You're like in the accounting students, no one's doing that.
Yeah, because like every presidency, they like shake out the tax law and they screw it all up, and some other lobby group sneaks in some tax thing that you're expected to know, and it's like it's got to be overwhelming, right?
100%. You literally almost have to like sign up for programs where people created processes to find the newest tax law and then bring it into presentations, right? And as a tax firm, we'll sign up for those places so that we're staying up to date on what's new. On what's new. There'll also be, there'll also be like, different like newsletters. Like I can go to the IRS's website and say what's new as well, but there's be so much information. So they organize it based on importance, based on what's going to affect most people. Yeah. But so it's a complete mess, right? But that's our job, and it's kind of like really cool because, I'll talk about let me first just say that's really why I got into accounting. I don't want to do it. I got a job offer before I even got out of college. That's why I took this job. So my finance degree dean actually gave me this job interview. He's like, you're one of my best students. You raise your hand every time I ask a question. You always have the answer. I know you're a detailed person, and I want to recommend you to this company. And it was actually, he's a finance person recommended to an accounting firm. So I went on the interview as excited, but I was already hired from the start, right? So nice. So one of the CEOs hired me. So it's kind of funny. These companies go through ups and downs. And there was a time where they fired maybe like 20% of their staff and relocated from the Empire State Building and things like that. And I kept my job. And, I was kind of a lower level analyst. And just because of who got me into the company, I kind of just I didn't get fired or whatever, right?
It's not who you are, it's who you know, right?
It's a big part of it. So that's why I took that job. So, I can go on interviews, but if someone's offering me I haven't graduated yet, and someone's offering me a job, let me take it, right? Yeah. So I just took the accounting field in this taxation for that reason. But honestly, auditing would be my passion, because auditing kind of explains why things work and why things don't. So auditing is like testing, like it might be like, for example, something simple, like if you're reporting, and this is more for like companies or trading stocks and have to publish things, but let's say like the Bernie Madoff situation, there was an accountant that figured out he was lying, because the long story short is that if you have XYZ amount of money in your bank account, your interest should be XYZ. What interest, your interest has to match the standard rate of what banks are giving out. So if your interest is below or above it, that's auditable, right? So if someone on their computer at home was able to audit him, right? This wasn't like an audit team. This was like someone, I forgot all the details of the person, but his a professor at university. His great returns are coming from Bernie Madoff. Their company wants to go into it, and he's head of the finance department, and they're trading. And he didn't want to invest in them because he said their returns are not realistic. So he audited their financials, found an error, and this is how the whole thing started, right? So a guy at home with his own computer and accounting knowledge was able to solve one of the biggest financial scams in the world, just because this company wanted to, he was fooling everyone else. But when his particular university wanted to invest, he did his research and said, based on this doesn't make sense. So that's the beauty of auditing and accounting, and that's why I love accounting in general, not so much tax.
Nice. So the doing taxes right now is just a placeholder for like a bigger goal after you're done being punched in the face for fun.
No, I mean, I fell in love, just to be completely honest with you, I'm in love with the field. The tax itself is kind of a hard, if you're doing tax returns for a numbers game or time for money where I'm like, do you have a W-2 and I'm putting that in? That's definitely not my area of expertise, right? I'm more like working with high value clients and trying to figure out if to roll over in a Roth IRA or stuff like that. So it's like, I'm more being paid for consulting and managing a team. At this point. So it's pretty, I'm not going to leave accounting, but the part of the laws changing is a nightmare, right? At any given time, you can have a big requirement to digest a large amount of information, so the government becomes your new boss in this career, right? And there's a lot of careers like that where there's like high bureaucracy and trying to manage, but what I love...
Anything where the government's involved is going to be high bureaucracy, high bullshit.
Anything where there's money.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Right, and accounting is the money tracker, right? So we're that arm of the government where it's like, I don't want to piss off my accountant, right? But I do love accounting for these reasons because... it's a lot of trust. So it's like it's almost like being a doctor, right? Someone's coming to me and they're telling me the most intimate parts of your life. I'm going through a divorce. I just had a kid.
Right.
I'm starting a business. I'm closing my business. These are my numbers for the year. This is how I'm actually doing financially, right? Regardless of how my Instagram looks, this is like the situation, right?
Right.
Yeah,
you can't hide from the bank account, right?
Right. So at the end of the day, when you're, discussing these intimacies with people, it's a very sacred place. And I really appreciate that about it. And one of the best parts about it as well is like, and that's why perspective is so beautiful. And that's why I think perspective is such a big driver in my life. Is like, I get to meet with so many interesting people. I get to meet with someone who is like the guy, I don't do his taxes, 40 billion, 8 billion, I'm sorry. Probably not qualified to handle his finances. But that being said, I'm dealing with some high net worth people and they're literally sitting down and telling me exactly how they got it and what their future plans are and how they plan to get more of it. Right. And all the little intricate deals of, like if I don't really do accounting, but I oversee it. So it might be like, okay, so who are you paying XYZ to? Okay, that's my broker. And this is how the deal's arranged. That's my business partner. We're paying him 8%. And so you're really getting the intricate how-tos of how successful people are running companies and understanding things. So this field has been amazing in perspective for me to really understand how the world actually works, right? Yeah. For you to sit down with that high-end billionaire and have a one-on-one conversation, ask him all the things you want to ask him. I mean, obviously, all the things I'm asking him of business relative to what he's doing. It's not anything I want to ask him. But as far as like, you have all this information, you were successful doing this, and I can ask you about it, it's kind of an open book between an accountant and their client. So generally speaking, it's such a beautiful exchange. And it's worth more than I'm getting paid for, So I love that part of the job as well.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned this because this is one of the things that I still enjoy about the mortgage space is you get to talk to interesting people about how they make their money, right? Because very similar to an audit, we have to do a deep dive on how people make their money, where their money's going. Sometimes we find out stuff we don't want to find out. We're looking at divorce decrees and things like that, and it can get very personal. But I'd love for you to either critique or push back on this statement or whatnot. A lot of people get fired up and upset about the tax code, right? Well, why is this person paying more tax than this person? Or why does this person have a higher tax rate than that person? Or, Warren Buffett, who's like one of my top 5 hated public figures. I can tell you about that later, maybe why. He'll famously say like, oh, why is my secretary charged at a higher tax rate than I am? And everybody has their complaint about the tax system. But if you just take a step back and you look from the 30,000 foot view, it's like the tax code is just an incentive structure for what the government wants to accomplish, right? Yeah. So it's like the government can't go build all the new housing, but they can give you a big tax break if you build housing, or the government, as much as they're trying to employ everybody, they can't actually employ everybody. So they give you tax credits for employing people. So in my mind, it's like, if you just understand it's a big game of incentive structures from the government saying we want private industry and private capital to take care of the stuff, you're like, well, I might disagree, but at least I understand the game. Yeah. Is that a fair statement, or am I naive, or where would you push back on that commentary?
I think it's a little bit of both, right?
Okay.
Like, you have the basic level understanding of like, it's my money, why do you want it?
Right. Right. Yeah, it pisses me off too. Like, I think taxation is theft. I'm a libertarian. I've got the yellow hat that says taxation is theft. I'm totally in the libertarian camp. And if I don't want to slit my own wrists and just be miserable every day, I kind of have to take a step back and be like, all right, well, maybe the government is trying to use taxation to motivate behavior for a better good. That, maybe. I don't know.
This is so funny. I've been drinking a little bit. I just came from an office party, but I try not to laugh too hard in the mic. But I literally just had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and this guy is one of my best friends and super successful. He just started a pool cleaning company. Shout out to Pool Bros. And not to talk numbers, but he had a pretty good year. He had to make a large investment to buy the pool routes and then to actually hire people to do the route running and stuff like that. And I've actually done some training with him. I think it's pretty cool because it testing chemicals and understanding the chemical balance of the pool. Like, it's just not water, right? It's like there's something going on there. This thing holds on to that. Chlorine actually takes the thing out of it. It's a lot of complicated stuff going on in there. But it's funny, he had a very successful year, and now I'm explaining to him the tax code. He's like, okay, I got all my numbers done. This is how much money's in my bank account. I want to know how much of it is mine, right?
Right.
So when I explained to him that, whatever his tax bracket is, let's say it's 22%. And then if he's self-employed, he actually has to pay 15.3% Social Security and Medicare tax.
Yeah.
So, let's just say it's $100,000, just to make the number simple. That's $22,000 in federal income taxes. And then that's $15,000 in Social Security and Medicare. So that's a lot of taxes from $100,000. If you had $100,000 in your bank account, let's say you didn't spend any money in your home or anything like that, and all the money from the business was there, that's a large portion or chunk to be paying, over $30,000, 30% of your earnings, right?
Yeah.
So it's when I explained this to him, he's like, whoa, because especially when you're in these situations, you're not a W-2 employee, they're withholding it for you. Well, your paycheck is your paycheck. Whatever you get is what you get. And you're like, okay, cool, this is my paycheck. But when you're making it yourself and now you have estimated tax payments and different things of that nature, and maybe you have to pay a lump sum at the end, you're like, whoa, I didn't realize.
Right.
So it's just funny. So that's to explain that mentality. There are people out there is like, this is my money. I worked hard for this.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But to get some pushback on it, 100%. It's an incentivized program. What jumps to mind is monopoly, right? Why is it 200 when you pass go, right? It's incentive to keep rolling. Right?
Yeah, you got to keep moving. The money has to keep moving, right?
Yeah, so, it's like, don't worry, you'll get past going a little bit, right? So, but the tax code is that, where it's if you know how to use it, to talk to that experience, I forgot, maybe Warren Buffett you mentioned. Why is he paying more than his secretary? We live in a very, even though tax rates might be high, and they don't have to be particularly this high. I'm not budgeting for us, so they know what their budget are. But the thing is that we live in a very fair tax system, in my opinion. Shout out to Donald Trump. He actually changed the tax code, made it a lot simpler. Most people used to have to itemize deductions and write off all these things off personally just to get a tax write-off. He raised the standard deduction so high, $12,000 for personal, and I think it's like $25,000 for a married filing jointly couple. So generally speaking, if you're making under that income, you don't even have to pay taxes at all. So you're within the kind of poverty line limits, or what our country would call that, and you don't have to pay no taxes on that whatsoever. And we live in a perpetual system, so meaning that every tier of income you make a new tax bracket, it doesn't tax all of your income at that rate. So the first, $12,000 is zero rate, and maybe the next $30,000 might be at 15%, right? Or let's call it 22%. And then you go up from that, maybe another $50,000. That percentage is going to be at 22%, 24%. And then if you jump all the way to maybe $160,000, now you're in the 32%. So and when you're in the 32%, again, just that last 100,000 is taxed at 32%. So as you increase in income, you're technically going to have only that tier of income attached to a new higher percent. It's not the total number. Right. So it's actually only taxing people that go higher or higher.
Right.
So that's a misconception completely. That
this has to be one of the number one things Americans are ignorant on. Yeah. Like, I formerly lived in the state of California. So if you're at like 39%, 41% federal tax rate and 10% state tax rate, the correct answer is yes. At some point, they do get 50% of every dollar you make, but that's only 50 cents on every dollar that you make, like over $1 million. The first $1 million is taxed at a much lower rate, or whatever the tax stratifications are. But most people don't think that. They think all the way back to $1, you're losing 50%, which, that's what I want people to think so that they vote for lower taxes, but that's not actually the truth.
Exactly. And I think that's probably the biggest misconception. And when you explain that to people, they're like, okay, because now that's where we come in as a tax advisor, I can make, so do you want to invest this much into your 401k is going to drop your income tax, or if you take this much out of your retirement account, it's going to bring your income tax. You could stop right at the level before you go into that new bracket if you have that type of control, right? So it is a system, and I think it gets a lot of critique. That being said, the problem comes in, and it's like a three-part, right? So no, don't tax me at all. It's a really fair system, and then now the problem comes in with loopholes, and it's almost like the law, right? The law is just trying to keep up with humans in reality.
Right.
So
Good luck.
They can't write this fast enough, right?
Right.
So they're incentivizing businesses. Like, for example, you can buy, it might actually end in 2022, but you can buy a vehicle and write off 100% of it. I actually think Congress did extend it. I was reading up on it, actually. But this is something that Congress chooses to extend, or they say, no, let's get rid of it, right? So
is this the section 179 over 6,000 pounds?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a reason the last 3 of my cars have been over 6,000 pounds.
Exactly. So you can write the full thing off, right?
Right.
So if you buy a car, and I think this is going to continue, but if you buy a car in 2022, or an asset, it can be anything, right? Equipment, buildings, whatever, you could write off the entire amount in that 1 year. Right. So normally these things go through a depreciation or a lifespan of 5, 27 years, depending what it is. And you get to write all off. So for example, my friend, he was thinking about buying a new truck to help run the routes, and he wants to write it all off because now instead of paying, let's say he had 100,000, just making that number up, and he were to write off, he would buy a $20,000 truck cash, or you can even buy it on credit, doesn't matter actually. But he bought a $22,000 truck, he can reduce his entire income by $22,000. Yeah. That's how most people think it works. So I made $100,000, I'm gonna buy a $20,000 truck, I should be able to reduce my income to $80,000. No, the IRS normally has you depreciate that vehicle over the life of it to make the expenses match the income it's gonna bring in. But they allow this 179 deduction that they extend, and this now allows him to actually do that simple thing that he thought he could do, which is write it all off in 1 year.
Right.
So the years you have a good year, they want you to not save your money, but actually go ahead and spend it. And this way you feel comfortable spending because it's actually going to reduce your taxes.
Right. And it's just an incentive situation, right? They want you to stimulate the economy. There's a reason why the Tesla Model X weighs 6,001 pounds. They made a bigger battery, so it weighs over 6,000 pounds, so it can be a fleet vehicle, so you can write that off. So it's like, all right, well, do you want to pay taxes on that $100,000, or do you want to go buy a $100,000 Tesla Model X and depreciate all of that in the year? So let me be selfish and ask a question that might apply to me. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, I bought a Ram 2500 because my coaching business clearly needed a 5-ton 4-wheel drive truck to run the coaching business. With all this equipment, we had to move it somewhere. So, I bought an $80,000 truck. I was able to write off 100% of that depreciation in the first year that I owned it. What happens when I go to sell that truck? Do I get an $80,000 tax bill or taxable income because I have to recapture that depreciation? Or do I just have to just keep it for the 7 years and then it's kind of like goes away?
Yeah, so technically you do have to recapture and pay taxes on that if you do sell it. So if you do get a benefit, it's called like a salvage value. So let's say you total the car, the salvage value, if they give you, would be whatever the insurance paid you.
Yeah, 12 grand or something.
Exactly, like that. And then you would not have to pay tax on that, right? If you were to sell the car, whatever price you sold it at, that would now be new income to you, and you would have to pay tax on that. So it is.
But if I keep just trading in and getting the next car, does that carry over?
It carries over. So the trade-in value actually might be taxable too. I'm sorry.
Don't tell me that. I don't want to hear this shit.
You're like, low trade-in value, no problem.
So let me, this is a good question.
It's not all the way free money, right? It's like you do have, if you write it all off, eventually, if you use it long enough, the value of the car, the fair market value, say you don't sell it, right, and you're just like, okay, I'm closing this business down, or I don't need this truck anymore, and I'm taking it personally, right? You can take a distribution of that truck, which will be taxable to you, but you can then try to maybe go online and find a fair market value of that, which might be a little more. You can find a couple different options to figure out what that is.
So if in 8 years I give the truck from my business to myself, and the truck's only worth $8,000 because it's a 9-year-old truck with 200,000 miles, then I'm only paying taxes on the $8,000, not the $80,000 that I bought it for. Okay, cool. So let me ask you.
So those would be one of the loopholes that people would mention.
Loophole. Right? I'm all about loopholes.
It's not a loophole. It's a process. But.
It's a process. Yeah, it's a process, not a loophole. So this is a good question. Like, when it comes to taxation, where do you, and maybe you have an example of this, like we'll just take a hypothetical business owner, right? Somebody owns their own widget manufacturing company. Where is this is definitely in the letter of the law. this is a loophole. This is definitely the gray area. You better be ready to defend this in an audit versus like, no, bro, this is just fraud. We can't do this, right? It's like I'm thinking, let me give you an example. I'm thinking of this financial planner that I know, and he was wildly successful financial planner, but he also wholesaled products, right? So it's like, not only did he have his own book of financial planning clients, he was like an authorized representative for a mutual fund company, and he would go out and he would get other financial planners to basically use that investment product, right? So he was constantly out whining and dining and golfing. And I know for a fact, I won't say what company he worked for. I know for a fact he got audited. And one of the things that came up was all the strip clubs that he wrote off. And he's like, look, man, that's
what my clients like.
Yeah, this is my business development. I take a bunch of rich financial planners out for dinner, golf, drinks, cigars, strip clubs. And the next day I saw them such a good time, they sign on the contract to be an exclusive vendor of XYZ mutual fund company. Yeah. That is a effing business expense.
100%.
And okay, you said 100%, but like I think a lot of tax preparers would be like, "Oh no, I'm not playing that game. Like, you can't write that off. That's not a branded t-shirt. That's not office supplies. That's like, that's like Little Darlings on Las Vegas Boulevard. That doesn't qualify." So maybe you can pick a few examples and just walk us through like, "Hey, this is totally cool. This is loophole gray area, and this is like, no way, I'm not losing my license or going to jail as your tax professional for this bullshit."
I'll try to cap on those because those are really good points. I was laughing as you're like breaking down the different sections because you run into each one all the time as a tax professional, right? Or even like I'm sure in your field where someone is coming and they have like a lot of income, but they can't really show where it's coming from or something like that, right?
So this is my favorite. I'll give you my normal example. Hey Scott, I want to buy a house. Okay, cool. What do you want to buy? $1.5 million house. Okay, cool. How much you putting down? 20%. Okay, cool. So you got $300,000 down for your $1.5 million. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, what do you do for a living? Oh, I direct commercials. I have a exclusive contract with Lexus and Honda, and I do all of their high-end commercials. So I'm a commercial director. I'm like, cool. You're not a videographer, an editor. You have no equipment. No, just me. I just show up. I direct the commercial. Okay, cool. So you basically have no overhead. How much did you make last year? I made about $600,000. Okay, cool. Send me over your tax returns. I get their tax returns where their corporation says top line number, 600,000, salary to officer, 36,000, because that's kind of the minimum the IRS says you have to pay yourself to like you're an employee. And then write off, net income, $28,000. So then I got to call the client. I'm like, hey, you got $36,000 in salary. You got $28,000, quote unquote, from your corporation on net profit. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I'm not judging you. I hate the IRS just like everybody else. But what you're telling the IRS is that in order to make $600,000, you had $540,000 of expenses. And my underwriter has to look at that and say, oh, all he's got left over for his mortgage is $60,000 a year. You don't qualify for shit. And then they're mad at me.
At least not in the range they're talking about.
Yeah, it's like they're mad at me. And I'm like, hey, it's not my fault, dude. Based on your tax returns, you qualify to buy like a Honda Accord. That's about it. You don't qualify for a house. And I'm the bad guy that has to give them the reality check on what it is for all the mortgage fraud or the tax fraud that they've been committing. Because I'm like, okay, I get it. Maybe you write off your cable bill. Maybe you write off that. There's some things as an entertainment person or as a director you could write off.
Depreciate it.
Yeah, you could depreciate, but come on, bro. You don't have $550,000 of expenses on $600,000 of income, or else that business would cease to exist. Yeah. So yeah, those are my experiences as a loan officer, and it drives me bonkers. So
no, it's 100% right.
Tell me where you play, and you're like, come on, man.
Yeah, just to jump off that really quickly, it's like the idea of that. This happens all the time, same right, and I can only tell when someone is bullshitting when they say, I want to buy a house. How much do I need to report?
Right.
That's the biggest red flag, right? It's like, I don't think I can even work with you at this point.
Right.
You might want to go somewhere else.
Totally.
But people don't understand that balance, right? Not paying Uncle Sam all of your check and then still being able to report because all the banking systems are using Uncle Sam's reports, which is tax returns and things of that nature. It's like, it doesn't matter if you have $1 million in your bank account unless you're buying it cash. You need $100,000 in a loan. You still need to show that you have that income to do that last part. They don't care if you made $1 million or have $1 million in your bank account, right?
Yeah.
Can you finish paying off this loan, right? So it is that balance where people are like, I want to report no income, right? And then, but now I can't really work around in the real world of where the financial reporting is practicing. So there are a lot of people out there doing that. And I would recommend like you actually sit down with an accountant and go over your real numbers and then talk about what you can do from there, because that will put you in a better position to not have to play these games, right? And let's assume most Americans are not doing this, right? There's only like a one or two people that come with these businesses and these weird activities, right?
Right. Seems to be every single one of my clients from LA. Every single client that buys a house in LA has one of these weird messed up situations. I meet somebody in Phoenix or Las Vegas. They're like, yeah, I got one pay stub, one W-2. I made $90,000. I took my standard deduction. I'm like, awesome. I meet somebody in LA and they're like, well, I own a specialty leather bra and underwear manufacturing company, and I made $2.3 million, but I pay taxes on negative $100,000. I'm like, well, I can't help you with a loan, man. You better be able to pay cash.
Yeah. But I have money in the bank. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
The down payment is taken care of. We need the rest, right?
Yeah.
So no, it is that balance. So it's hard to pick certain scenarios, but it's I would say let's say yellow flag would be someone that does have bank accounts and does have traceable, expenses, and they're showing that they have everything in check. But when you're asking specific questions like, okay, so how much do you pay in rent a month for this studio? And they're like, I don't know, right? How much do you pay for this? Like, so if you just don't even have, some people are like honest people and they just don't understand the accounting behind it. They never had an accounting background. They never hired an accountant. And they think at the end of the year, they give their bank statements over, right? That's kind of like something you do throughout the year to track how much you're making.
Right.
So there's like, let's say that's a yellow flag where this person kind of like, I can work with you. Show me your bank accounts. We can do the bookkeeping. We can find out exactly how much you made and then go from there, right?
Yeah.
And then now we have your numbers. We can make some examples. Maybe write this truck off. Maybe a lot of things people don't understand financial statements are good for is being able to negotiate. Right. So I have a client who she makes like a legit business. She makes like maybe like 200, 300,000 in hotel stays. So sometimes it's who you know. So she happens to know a lot of influential people. And when they want to travel to America, she becomes their travel agent. So she's like booking hotels for them, the cars, et cetera, et cetera.
Makes
Just foot in the ground, right? This person knows if you want to come to Manhattan, I'll book it up for you, right? Because when you're a foreigner, you don't really know where to go, where to eat. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you don't want to stay in like Hell's Kitchen if you were expecting to get like a, Broadway type experience.
Exactly. So that's what she does for a living. And she pays like, I want to say upwards to like $50,000 to $80,000 in merchant fees. So just the process when you swipe a card and then like they take like 3%. So just based on that information, she's now able to shop around. She's like, hey, she can go to different merchant vendors right now and say, I know my numbers. I processed about $600,000 a year, and I'm currently paying about $80,000 in merchant fees. Can you beat that deal? And because it's such a large book of business, they say, hey, we'll give you a percentage off. We'll beat that company's rate by percentage, right? So now your financial numbers let you see what you're spending annually, and now you're able to say, wow, I spent that much of meals and entertainment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So going back to that question on the meals and entertainment, it's like, shout out to Donald Trump. That's a loophole he closed, right? So you can still write off meals, but you can no longer write off entertainment. So, he gets a lot of flack, but for someone like myself in the tax industry, seeing some of the changes Donald Trump made in that, he's a businessman. He's seen all the loopholes himself.
Right,
he's seen a lot of things. So he was actually perfectly positioned to work on tax code, right? And for business structure and stuff like that. So he actually did a lot there. And so your friend could no longer write those off, right? So maybe he was still writing it off and not understanding. I don't know when it happened with the audit or whatever, but this was during Donald Trump's era. So
yeah, it was pre-Donald Trump, so he did okay. I think he actually won that audit, which was wild to me. All right, so I'll play hypothetical and you play the IRS. Let's say hypothetically, I'm going to hang myself here if I ever get audited. Let's say hypothetically, this guy owns a coaching business. And he coaches people on sales process and a little bit of life coaching, a lot of business coaching, et cetera, et cetera. If this person was to go get all of his licenses to be like a range safety officer and train gun shooting and bring in some amount of revenue, even though it's a minuscule percentage compared to the overall coaching business, could he then write off all of his gun purchases, ammo purchases? Because I'm just thinking hypothetically, let's say last year I went and got all my National Rifle Association certifications to like teach firearms and teach like proper safety practices and run a range and do all that stuff. And then I made, I don't know, a couple $1,000s teaching people how to shoot guns. Could I then write off like the $7,000 of guns and ammo that I bought?
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Not that this is a real thing, of course.
No, of course not. But hypothetically, let's say yes.
Okay.
Hypothetically, right?
When I get audited, I know who I'm calling.
Exactly. Hypothetically, I won't answer. I'm just kidding. But let me give you a long story of why that could be yes. And it probably is not advisable, right? So generally speaking, an LLC can have more than one activity. So I'm just giving you the law version of it.
Yeah. And let's say I do have an LLC called Consolidated Coaching LLC, hypothetically.
Hypothetically. So I'm just trying to give you like the IRS point of view of it. I'm not trying to say it's right or wrong.
Yeah. No, just play the IRS.
Yeah.
Play the bad guy.
So I'm like the guy when it's like, let's say I'm the IRS and I'm on the stand and the guy's like asking the question. That's the way I'm like responding, where I'm like telling you the answer that I have to tell you, but I probably wouldn't tell you this if I was IRS. Right. But it's all in the tax code, so they're telling you. So not hypothetically, an LLC can actually have multiple activities. So that's one of my biggest questions clients get. I have this business that I'm running through the side. Do I need to open a whole new bank account for it and this, that, the third? No, you can have a P&L where it says construction income, consulting income. You know, you have different types of tiers of income and you have expenses that matches each one of those incomes, right? So there's not an issue for you to have a multiple activities. Generally speaking, if these activities become significant, we'd recommend separating them because as far as what you can write off from a business, to give you the short version of it, is anything that's ordinary and necessary. So ordinary would be based on your industry. So, you know, in a particular consulting industry, or let's just say this industry you're in, this is an actual business where you're interviewing people and creating content, right?
Right.
A media personality. So there's a lot of cameras in here. There's a lot of mics in here. There's all these wires. I was talking to Chris about.
Oh, God. We've gotten $100 to death on wires for like 5 years.
Exactly. So I see wires all over the place, and he's saying that's one of the big costs we have. And an IRS person may not understand that. You may have to get audited and explain to you, like, this is the setup, like we have the receipts. So that being said, that's the industry normal, industry standard. And then the other part of it is the necessary. So this is something that might not be a standard for the industry, but it's necessary for you guys, like the cigars. This is a branded part of what we're doing, smoking cigars on set. So we have to buy cigars for our business. This is part of the...
I love where this is going, by the way.
This is part of, you know, what we do and what we show. Like, you ever seen that that podcast show, Drink Champs?
Yeah.
I'm sure they're writing off the liquor.
Yeah, you got it, right? Like, our friend has a contract with Drinking Bros podcast. Like, it's a comedy show, and they sit around and they get drunk. And then he has another one, Highly Social, where they sit around and get high. And it's like, that's the appeal of the show, right? You got to be able to write off your weed.
So the weed might be questionable. It's illegal on the federal level. So maybe they might have some issues there with the marijuana, but I'm sure the liquor and the cigars are more reasonable.
I think we can find it. Anyway, we'll talk about the weed later, off air.
But just to go into that, right? So those are the two criteria. So let's say what is necessary for us may not be necessary for another podcast, right? Depending on the content and so on and so forth. That being said, when you have multiple activities within the same business, it's hard to become what is ordinary. So that ordinary necessary part, now the ordinary becomes a little screwed because you're not an ordinary business. You're a 6 activity. You know, how can we justify all these expenses attached to all these activities, right?
Yeah.
So generally speaking, if they start becoming significant, and significant is, you know, a term that is hard to define, but the IRS kind of defines it as more than 10%. Right. But, you know, they're not going to audit you for something that's less than 10%. It's like, this is minuscule, right? It's not, we're not going to get much from this, even if we find out that you're lying about it per se, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the thing about being audited. I'm not saying, you know, lie less than 10%, but what I'm trying to say is, like, they need to say without a doubt before we send someone and hire people to go look into this, that this guy is not following the tier, right?
So let's say Consolidated Coaching makes $500,000 a year. And what's interesting to me is, like, the way that I'll find a mortgage coaching client is they'll be like, oh, I saw you speak at a live event in Louisiana, and then you gave me a free copy of the book, which I'm writing off the, the book that I wrote. And then 6 months later, I finally read it. And then somehow I saw your podcast with a guy about taxation, and you were kind of like, you were my cup of tea. You're kind of my kind of guy. And then a year later, they'll circle around and sign up for coaching. So, like, if I ever got audited and there's like, well, where's your marketing budget? I'm like, well, my marketing budget is like kind of the podcast, kind of the personality brand, kind of this, because it all goes together. But to get back to your point about the 10%, like, let's say Consolidated Coaching is making $500,000. If all of a sudden I put a line item on there, I had to buy $70,000 worth of cigars, I'm getting audited.
Yeah.
But if it's a grand worth of cigars or something, it's like, okay, that's kind of normal, ordinary business expenses for the branded podcast you have where you smoke cigars. Something like that. Is that, am I interpreting that kind of correct?
I'm going to stand here. I'm not sure if I want to answer that question.
Okay.
I'll plead the fifth.
Perfect. Plead the fifth. You're allowed.
No, but I think that's a little bit more reasonable, right? And just to make it even more reasonable, because we're just trying to be, these are hypothetical situations, right? I would have to look at your numbers and try to figure out what's what. But let's say if 10%, and it's not to say that 10% is a golden number. Some companies, their marketing budget is 50% of their income.
Yeah.
Right? So
Amazon was like a like a losing company, right? They had a negative tax return for like the first 20 years of their existence because everything was going back into marketing and research and development.
Yeah.
I think you'll have to look this up, Chris. How when was Amazon founded and when did they finally have a profitable year? I think it was almost 20 years before they were profitable because all of their budget was going back into growth, research, development, marketing. So yeah, 10%, not a rule, just a guideline.
A guideline, if you would. So it's also a guideline not to get audited, but for yourself, right? So it's like, what is significant? So you need to be able to have measurements within, let's say you need to know within 10% surety that all your expenses are correct, right? So this is any expense you have, it can't be overstated or understated by more than 10%. Because now if they actually just show the receipts and you don't have those receipts, now you end up in a bigger audit, right? They're going to audit all of your transactions now. So you just want to make sure that you're reporting stuff. If you make a mistake here or there, that's what that's for. We're not going to, drill you down just because you made a small mistake, right?
Yeah.
Let's call 10% small.
94, 2001, mostly because they expanded beyond books.
So 17 years straight, Amazon did
94, 2001.
Oh, 7 years.
Yeah.
7 years. Okay, I thought it was much longer than that. But for 7 years, Amazon...
I think you're thinking of like Uber and stuff like that where
they're still not profitable. Yeah. Yeah, sure, they're still not profitable. Nobody's making money from Uber or Netflix or whatever. But interesting. I like that as a guideline. And, there's something that's come up, if you're in the libertarian social media sphere, we see a lot of this stuff where it's like, the Pentagon can fail their budget and not be able to account for $5 billion. But if you Venmo somebody more than $600, you better be able to account for it. So can you explain this Venmo meme and also explain obviously I pay Chris tens of thousands of dollars a year for marketing activities and graphics and podcasts and assistant in the coaching.
No, you don't.
So I have to issue him a 1099. But then it's like if you pay a corporation, you don't have to issue them a 1099. Can you explain a little bit like this Venmo thing where they really are or are not trying to find you for $600 I gave my 21-year-old kid for books?
Those are two really good points separated, like the Venmo 600 and then the S corporation. So I can tell you also know your stuff. So this is really in-depth stuff. So let's just try to make it simple. The Venmo thing, I think, happened recently, right? And this is more like this is unrealistic. I don't think the government currently has the system to do it. When they do come up with this new coin they're coming out, maybe the cryptocurrency, they're trying to, supposedly, I'm hearing stuff on the internet, there's nothing official, right? I only get it after it's official. That's when I become an expert and I can go read it. So when things are just ideas in Congress and they're voting about it. So I know there's a new currency coming up for America that they're trying to make it digital. And supposedly when America stops using 60% of we're close to like 50 right now, but supposedly when it's like 60% non-cash, they're going to introduce this thing. So people are still using cash and it's kind of slowing it down because they don't want to circumvent or cut off the economy by saying this is the new wave. So I think what I've heard, and this is not a tax expert, this is like internet rumors because there's no information on it.
This is tinfoil hashing.
Yeah, this is exactly. So they're waiting for 60% of credit card users versus cash use. And then they're going to be able to introduce this because everyone is already digital. And at that point, they probably will have the ability to track every transaction because there won't be any Zelle anymore or anything like that. The government will be the one. This government system that you sign up for will be the one controlling all the transfers and knowing that you're Joe Smo and who you are, right? And you probably won't be able to access it without that. So it's almost like, I forgot the country. I think I don't want to name a country, but it's a country in Africa. They tried to stop cryptocurrency by saying they can only go through a bank, right? And that's how they say you got to go create a bank account and this, that, third. But that's it goes against cryptocurrency because the entry to barriers. So there's no entry to barrier. You can go to the store with cash and buy some. Right. But now to have a bank account, you might need ID and this, that, third. So it kind of slows down money transferring. This freedom of flow is what cryptocurrency is or electric money is becoming. So that whole thing, I think that's in the pipeline, and they're putting it out there, and there's no real way to track it right now. But eventually, yes, there's it sounds like let me just say this, right? I had a person that I used to work with, and it was like yellow flag, right? We call it red flag, yellow flag, green. And she wanted to report her money, but she was a stripper, right? Or at least that's what she told me. I didn't know exactly what she did, but she had large amounts of money that she wanted to report, and she was reporting
probably so she could get a home loan.
Exactly. So her mortgage told her, I know you have a lot of cash, but your tax returns, you need at least 2 years, right? So she came to me to report the income. I'm not in a position to really audit her. I'm just saying, like, and the IRS is not really auditing you for income. Right? Unless you are going through like a payment system where if you're just the honest truth is if you're dealing with cash, and that's why so many businesses will give you a discount for cash,
right?
Because they know it's hard for the IRS to track it, right? For those people that are trying to avoid that. But she's technically receiving dollar tips every day at the end, and maybe technically, I think the strip club is supposed to be writing down how much the tips are and potentially giving her W-2. Unrealistic.
Yeah, that not happening.
Everyone's drunk at the end of the night and is like, how much you guys? That's your money, right?
Yeah.
So, but she wants to report hers, and so she started reporting large amounts of cash. So the IRS is probably not going to come and audit her and say, you reported $80,000 last year in being a stripper or a performer, dancer, right? You didn't get a 1099, right? There's no paperwork associated with this, but they're not going to probably audit her in her income. What they might audit her is her expenses, like, the lingerie or whatever else she's buying or doing to support that business. That's more likely where the IRS is coming after you. So it's almost like, don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
I know that's kind of a controversial topic,
right?
But for the military or whatever, but it's almost like that with the IRS. It's like we rather you report it, because if we actually find you with a large amount of money, say some other situation, like I heard about this guy, he had like $8 million in his house in the walls, right?
Right.
And now he had to prove where that money comes from. So they're saying, like, if we find you with all this money and you don't have receipts to show where you got them from, we're going to assume you're money laundering, and then there's going to be not criminal investigation on you and things of that nature. So they're saying, if you have the money and you don't have to tell us exactly where you're getting it from, we want you to report it. So no one's actually saying that, but they're trying to read in between the lines, because they're saying, if we find you with this money and no receipts, we're going to charge you for these things. Mm-hmm. So if you have this money, you might as well pay taxes on it. And then it's kind of a loophole where he reported that.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't know where he got it, but he reported that.
Do you think we will get to a system either because digital currency comes into the system, or just tracking the financial dollars will become so ubiquitous and so easy because, everything's through Zelle, which is through Chase, and Chase has to report all the numbers to the government? Do you think we'll get to a point where, like, it's 2023, right? And I give my son, he's 21 years old. He has a full-time job. He's going to college. When he needs money for books or something, I'll Venmo him $500. Or when I have a really great month in the mortgage business, I'll Venmo him $1,000 and be like, hey man, I know you crashed your car. Here's some money to put towards savings. Do you think we'll get to a point where, like, in a few years, I'll get that little nasty gram from the IRS where it's like, we think your tax adjustment should be, or no, my son will get the nasty gram from the IRS where, like, we see that you got $2,600 in Venmo deposits this year. We have nowhere to track that. Your father didn't issue you a 1099, so we think you have $2,600 of additional earned income. You owe us $400 in taxes. Do you think we'll get there eventually?
100%.
Oh, I opt out. How can I opt? Can I just buy gold?
Cash.
If I was Ben Shapiro, this is where we would enter a commercial for gold, right? Like, buy gold. It's untraceable. But like,
and the value changes. Right?
And the value changes. Yeah. It's just like, I kind of want to I just want to opt out of all this shit.
Just to keep on just trying to give you tax information related to that question. So that's a hypothetical then had. Will we get there? I think so. I think that's the whole point of putting out that kind of legislation. So it's like, let's get you comfortable with the idea before we prosecute anyone for that, right? It's laughable now, but eventually we'll get to a point. Yeah. And it's probably not coming after the person with the 600, but they're saying that if you're transferring more than 600 at a time, it's probably going to be logged. Right? That's pretty much what they're saying. And if those transactions add up to maybe over 100,000, now we're coming knocking. Right. So it's probably that kind of system, but they're saying the 600 to create a limit. They don't want to track every dollar, right? But if someone is transferring large amounts of money, and for them 600, right? Maybe they're not tracking all your money, but every time a $600 plus transaction, it's almost like anytime someone buys something in cash more than 10 grand,
Yeah.
you have to like fill out a special report.
Yeah, the race
So
10K form.
Exactly. So we're already comfortable with that, right?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, who's walking around 10K? You shouldn't be doing that anyway. Report it.
Yeah.
So now they're saying the same thing now for electric transfer of 600. So they're just doing the same thing, but bringing it down to a different, more minuscule level. And they probably, when you fill out that form, no one probably gets in trouble. But maybe if he does 10 of those transactions in a year, they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know, like, where's this guy getting all this cash, right?
Yeah. I actually had to fill out one of those race 10K forms the other day because we did a whole new fencing along the front of our house that you might have saw when you pulled up. And like, we have our contractor, but then this was a subcontractor. Then my contractor's out of town. And our contractor called us in a panic. And he's like, hey, man, like, instead of you paying me and me paying him and stuff, he's got a truck full of steel being delivered because every one of those slats was like individually fabricated. Can you just pay him directly 18 grand? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's put this in a text, do the thing. Cause you know, like the delivery wanted it in cash. I'm sure for reasons because they're trying to avoid stuff.
All construction pays in cash.
All construction.
They don't want to check. They don't want to wire transfer.
Exactly. So I went to the bank and I asked for 18 grand in an account that had like 19 grand in it. And they're like, oh, are you closing your account, sir? I'm like, no, I just need to pay some contractors. I promise I'm not a drug addict.
And they're writing your name now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to a high stakes poker game. Although I have to imagine large cash withdrawals are more common in Las Vegas because people are playing in high stakes poker games and stuff like that. But anyway, so when you're done, they say, oh, by the way, we need your name and business and I need a copy of your IDs. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I used to work at a bank, fill out the race 10K form. So yeah, that's been around for 30 years and we're kind of used to that. But $600 seems such a low barrier to entry. I like what you said though, that it's like, it's not about the $600. It's about the kid who's offering some service and he has dozens and dozens and dozens of $600 deposits, but then he's not paying any taxes. That's the person they're going to look at.
Yeah. That's kind of where I think they're going with that.
That makes sense. So tell me a little bit why smart people like getting punched in the face, because I find that some of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners that I meet on the mat, you know, contrary to probably what the stereotype would be, they're not like, you know, walking orangutans who are just like, oh, I like to fight. Like we're not morons, right? Like you and I have seen so many people that they're not these meatheads. They're not like
me and you, for example.
Yeah. You and I, we are definitely not meatheads. Well, maybe we're meatheads, but we're not dumb meatheads. Yeah. Like I feel like jiu-jitsu, especially the super high level competitors, they're almost got like on the spectrum of autism, right? Because it's like they're like the Rain Man of violence. Yes. So why is it that mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu attracts, like, I would think, a more intellectual breed than maybe, I don't know, other combat sports or other athletic endeavors? That's
such a loaded question. I don't have the expertise to answer, but I'll try.
Okay, perfect. That's what this podcast is all about. Non-experts answering expert questions. And actually, Chris, we should put that in the bio on YouTube, like non-experts answering expert questions on the Edge podcast.
Right. On the Edge is such a good segue, right? Because I'm on the edge of, you know, being a financial expert, and now I'm on the edge of, you know, bashing faces in, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of funny. It's like,
you're so smart. You're going to go into the ring with an intention of knocking somebody unconscious. Like that's pretty crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, the best analogy to go back to the IRS is that they have internal IRS agents and they carry a pistol. So you don't mess with your auditor.
No.
Because you can imagine they run into a lot of angry people. Hey, I'm here to audit you and you owe XYZ.
Yeah.
I'm getting my gun. I have one.
I was able to laugh at that, but the libertarian in me is like shrieking at the idea of like taxation at the end of a gun. Like my stomach is turning in ways that you don't even understand right now. Anyway, I digress. So tell me why smart people like getting punched in the face.
So, no, I think, you know, it's honestly one of the most intricate, most beautiful things we have left in our society. And, you know, especially like MMA, I think, as opposed to, I mean, jiu-jitsu definitely, because it's like jiu-jitsu is you're really here to learn. I'll get to the MMA part. Jiu-jitsu is like, I'm definitely here to learn. And the best part about jiu-jitsu that other sports don't have, the ability to tap. I think this is such an amazing thought form. Like whoever came up with the concept of jiu-jitsu and gave the ability to tap is just genius, because I can get as deep as I want into an awful submission where you're going to break my arm off, and I say, that's enough.
Yeah.
And I learn how far my arm can go, right? And I can get out of it in a safe way. Most other sports, however, they don't have that. You're going to get beat up, and you need a ref to think you've gotten beat up too much to intervene, right?
Yeah.
So I think it is this, but so jiu-jitsu builds this concept where it's like, I can train for 20 years, you could train for 20 years, and we meet and we still don't know who's going to win. The 20 years you trained are on completely different things than I trained on. And that combination of events that happen between us is so unique that it may never happen again. That particular role, there's some pathways that are very normal, right?
Right.
And I'm going to try to get, hopefully I don't take too much time talking here, but I have this concept called invisible jiu-jitsu. And it's the part of jiu-jitsu that you don't see, or that someone who's been doing it for 20 years will have to explain to you. Even after they do the move to you, you see them do it on someone else. If they didn't use words to express a certain part, like a squeeze or grip, you wouldn't really be able to finish or accomplish that move. So there's certain parts of jiu-jitsu that is beyond the comprehension that you can get through anything else. It literally is one of those things where you kind of need a sensei, right? So it's a very intellectual game where it's like there's certain understandings that someone watching an MMA fight, like I used to be that person, think I could do that. And then the more I learn, I realize, oh, I can't. Like I had to learn what this person's actually doing. This person just did 3 moves in a row and you thought he was just fighting, right? He did 3 distinct particular things. And if you watch multiple versions of his fight, you realize he's doing the same thing over and over again. So you realize there's an intelligence there. He's not just swinging for the fences, if you would, right? A good example would be like the Strickland Adesanya fight, where we're expecting Strickland to brawl like he normally does, right? And just because of that, we also thought he might win doing that. But then he goes in there and he becomes defensively sound. And that's the invisible jiu-jitsu. So it's like, how do you win a fight not throwing a punch? Most people can't even see what he's doing. He's slowly deflecting punches. I can't even articulate, but someone like maybe DC can break down move by move and say, this is how he's closing the space. This is what he's doing. Maybe he can't even articulate it to you yet, right?
Right.
But he's able to do something so intelligent that he's changing how people look at fighting. It's like you don't have to be, well, he showed both sides, right? He's normally an aggressor, but he showed that you can stay close to the person that has the most dynamic weapons in the game, not throw a punch and let him tire himself out till he's backing up and he's afraid because you're too close. I got so close in your personal space, you know I can hurt you, but I haven't thrown anything. So you're in a panic state the entire time. So this is like intelligent, this is like fight knowledge, right? This is why in fighting, there's like 3 commentators, right? Because there's so many potentials happening that they need to debate and figure out what is going on in real time to tell the person that has no idea what's happening.
Right.
So there's this intricate knowledge that is in the fight game that is, let's call it free. It's like everything else, you kind of need a degree. Fighting is one of the things, a few things in this world that I can get better. I can be not technical, but I can get better at fighting, just fighting people. If I were just to spar with people, the top level, low level, different levels, something is going to click eventually where I'm like beating people up and I can't even explain what I'm doing. I just know he can't reach me and I can reach him, right? So the people that can actually articulate this information to the point that Joe Smo's like me and you can like pick it up. I'm a blue belt. I'm still a little low on the level.
Yeah, me too.
I like to say I'm a high level blue belt, which is an oxymoron. But, so it's
black belt in training, bro. You're a black belt
in training, right? So, and again, to me, it's not even about the belt, right? So some of my moves are black belt level, right? So, everyone has expertise and things of that nature. So, but the point we're getting at is that there is a huge amount of intelligence here. It's like I'm romanticizing it because for me, I like what works.
Right.
Let's put it that simple, right? Like the term they use in fighting a lot is high percentage, right? What combination is you're going to catch your opponent in 90% of the time? And like we're seeing in the maybe 90% is a high threshold. My threshold is normally like 60% of the times. I'm more likely to get this off on you than you defend it. 60% of the times, I'm willing to take that battle every time.
Right.
In fighting, there's a lot of 50-50 positions, right? Where like dogfight, or there's just different positions where I'm arm dragging you and you can arm drag me back. Like you name it. But there's a bunch of positions where it's like, I can win, you can win, right? And then there's a bunch of positions where it's like, I'm on your back. You have to escape. You're no longer fighting me. I'm not really in danger of, it's almost like, not to bore people that are not into jiu-jitsu, but jiu-jitsu starts standing, and then maybe you take someone down and maybe someone sits, right? And then you have to pass their guard, which is passing both their legs, right? And then the whole time the guy's trying to re-guard, right? He's trying to keep you in between his legs. So whether it's one leg in or two leg in, full guard, half guard, he's trying to keep you in his leg retention. Once you pass that, you're in half side control. And then now it's called control position. So even side control, you're still calling it re-guard. But for me, that's almost like an escape. right? Even though it's not so much escape, but you can kind of submit people and do different things, buggy chokes and all these different things. But long story short, you're really trying to just sweep and or escape at that point. Same with full mount and back take. So from a back take to full mount to side control, there's a clear dominance going on. And that's when you stop going from a 50-50 position to now there's like a 60-40% onward, where I'm more likely to submit you or do damage to you or whatever the case is. I'm winning, right? Gravity's on my side. So there's certain people that you don't want to get into their guard, because all you can do from there is escape. Now he's both legs around me, and I'm trying to escape this position right now. There's not too much I could do to him. So there's certain positions where you're trying to escape something versus where you're actually attacking or have the option to attack. And just putting yourself in more of these 60, 40 positions where you have the 60, or in recognizing when you're in a 40-60 position and get out of that position is just a big part of jiu-jitsu. So it's really a knowledge-based sports that is hard to express to someone that never did it. Right? Because it gets so intricate. In each position, you can write, there's hours and hours of tutorials of each position from different people around the world looking at the same thing a certain way. And sometimes you watch an hour tutorial and you follow everything he has to say, and then there's really only one part of it that's like, this is high percentage. If I can get this on someone, I'm winning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like those are the parts that you have to take out. And this just crossed my mind. It's something I didn't want to talk to you about as well. It's what makes intelligent people. Right, so we're joking around, pretending like we're intelligent and what have you. Right.
I would put you in the intelligent bag.
Right. Let's say I'm on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Which is an unpopular opinion, right? People don't like to hear that. There are people that we all have. There's like different skills, right? Different knowledges, right? In general, men are more spatially aware when it comes to like organizing boxes and things like that, and women might be more. They have the advantage, they can see colors better. So these are just two things I know dynamically in general about men and women. There might be a guy that can see better than a girl, and there might be a girl that can organize better than a guy.
Of course, on the bell curve, there's outliers everywhere.
But generally speaking, these are talents that are just innate within these people, right?
Yeah.
So each one of us, whether male or female, we have these innate talents in us, right? Where it's like understanding information a certain way. And if you don't have certain, let's say, social skills, and that's not your criteria, you haven't spent a lot of time trying to bag girls,
right?
Right. That's where you get most of, you don't have a lot of siblings, right? You may not, someone might call you on the spectrum just because you're not socially normal. You're not doing all of the, you're not laughing when people laugh because you don't find it funny, right? Or whatever the case is. That's when people call you on the spectrum, but it doesn't mean that person's not intelligent.
Right. Oh, no, I actually think most people that are on what would classically be considered like an autism spectrum, usually they're highly intelligent in a certain area. They're just maybe lacking, to your point, some social skills in some other area. But I think it's interesting because intelligence, when I first started this podcast, I started taking tutoring lessons from this guy who's a professor at Brown. I found him on some online website, and I'm like, hey, I think I'm fairly well read, and I think I'm like of a decent intelligence, but I'm not like classically educated. So at some point in this podcast, I'm going to reference like the Magna Carta, and it turns out that was actually in the Declaration of Independence, right? So I like started taking
you know the information, but maybe not the sources and all that.
Right. So I started taking this tutoring class from him, and he's like, hey man, he's like, you are no smarter or dumber than any of the other professors here at Brown. We just all have super specialized knowledge. He's like, so there is an IQ piece, like you can test somebody for an IQ, and Einstein was measurably smarter than, a Forrest Gump type character. Yeah. But there's also just specialized knowledge where like somebody spends their whole life learning about electrical engineering. In that area, they're going to seem like a genius. Yeah. And when it comes to spreadsheets, the Accounting. Two of us probably have them killed, right? Yeah. So it's like, there's just different levels. I have a theory on this. I'd love to get your take. Jiu-Jitsu's kind of had a hard time finding its footing on a spectator sport because it's not particularly interesting to watch.
It's also just so intricate details. Like if you don't know you don't understand a wrist lock until you get wrist locked.
Yeah. You don't understand how bad that hurts, right?
It's like he actually got that. He's good.
I think there's a reason, and tell me what you think about this. I think the reason why it's caught on like wildfire as a participant sport in America is because Americans really like winners. Like I think soccer struggles in America because it's one of the few games that can end in a tie. Yeah. And Americans do not like ties. We like winners and losers. And in jiu-jitsu, almost every roll, there is a defined winner or loser. If you tapped, you lost. Yeah. Like, we know in that moment when we rolled on Sunday, you were the better man. Like, I tapped twice in 5 minutes. Maybe we can find 30 seconds of footage in that 5 minutes where I was doing something well. But like, it's just clear. You were the winner. I was the loser. Fuck, I got to get better. And for you to go against the next guy, you know, if you go against Andy Varela, you're going to lose 3 times in 5 minutes. And you're like, oh yeah, he won. He's better. Like, 100%. I think Americans really like that. Is like, there's this clearly defined winner and loser. Yeah. And I think that's maybe why it's become so popular so fast.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's catching on, to be honest. I was just introduced to it as a friend, but I think MMA had a big part to do with it, to be honest, because I was an MMA spectator and I would watch fights, you know, and like, I'm a big guy. I assume I could strike. You know, we all think we can fight until
every guy thinks they can fight until somebody punches you in the face.
Right, and you got to put it together.
Yeah.
So just to talk about the MMA world, I think that when I was watching, I would see that these jiu-jitsu practitioners or someone who could do jiu-jitsu had a clear advantage, right? Famously, they say that wrestling is the main character because technically you can, the way I say it is you can control what the person's standing on. So if you're striking and I'm a wrestler, I can take you down, right? And things of that nature. So the wrestler has a big advantage in MMA as well, but it really comes down to like the jiu-jitsu practitioner because 9 times out of 10, the better jiu-jitsu person wins every time. It's not like that with striking. Striking is like, this guy's way more sound, but he has a crazy right hand and it's a 50-50 almost, right?
Yeah.
And this wrestler can take down the striker, but if he just learns, he doesn't have to wrestle, he just learns takes down defenses, right? He just learns a little caveat to not get taken down and to be able to get back up and make it a hard time for him. All of a sudden, every round they start after that he has to do that again and again and again. And it gets harder because the guy gets sweatier. But jiu-jitsu is like, you put 2 jiu-jitsu guys in a room or you put this jiu-jitsu guy in a dominant position. If this guy doesn't know what he's doing, he's not getting up.
Right.
He's getting submitted. So that was my draw to jiu-jitsu. MMA showed that it actually worked. When you bring all these different things together, karate, boxing, whatever it is, these finite details like your professor was saying, we all have expertise in this particular thing. And you put all those experts in a room to argue who wins, right? Me, I don't have the stats, but I bet on the jiu-jitsu guy most of the time.
Yeah.
Right? If he has some striking, some wrestling, right? Yeah. He can now take a little striking and a little wrestling and keep his jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's winning a lot of matches. Yeah. As opposed to like that striker, it's going to be very hard for him to get that core jiu-jitsu level where he can defend against a black belt. Blue belt, me and Andy Varela, right? Yeah. Even if I don't know his striking ability, I know he has fought in the past, but even if I was a better striker, he got me down.
It's over.
It's over.
Yeah.
And I'm a high level blue belt. So.
And no offense, but he would get you down.
So that's why I like jiu-jitsu, and I think that's why it's growing because we're just seeing that it works. We don't know what the moves are, and we don't know what's going on, but we see at the end fight he's breaking that arm, and then you see like besides knockouts, some of the more definitive wins are someone submitting someone with something like a broken arm or something like that.
Yeah, it's brutal. So I want to bring this full circle. Like, you're doing a lot of stuff, man. You're building this tax preparer business and you're managing a team and you're recently a father and sounds like you're happily married and you're doing jiu-jitsu as a hobby and you're going to like kind of test your mettle as a man by going into your first MMA fight. Thinking about your mom, right? Who like moved here from Trinidad for a better opportunity for a kid. Her kid goes to college, plays college football, which is not an easy thing to do. Now is having some success in the world, now becoming a family man. Full circle, like, did your mom succeed? Like, what do you think she's most proud of you for knowing that she left her home country to try to make a better opportunity for her kids?
Yeah, it's funny, man. It's like, my mom's not going to come to my fight because she thinks it's too brutal. She's like, I'll watch it after. But full circle, man, I think I got a lot of my work ethic from her. She was the kind of person that was working the 3 jobs and things of that nature. And because, that's the beauty of America, right? It's the rarest trait in where you find someone that potentially starts with nothing. That's the American story, right? You start with nothing, and if you work hard enough, it's not always hard work, it's intelligence as well, but you work hard enough and you maneuver yourself and you position yourself in the right ways, you can dramatically change your outcomes, right? And she has done that through working and showing me. I think her greatest accomplishment for me is just graduating college, right? She didn't know what it would be about. And, she didn't know what opportunities it would bring for me. Because, there's a lot of people graduate college and they're not working in the field, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just the idea of like you go to school and that's the end of it. We live in a society now where, college may not even be the best avenue for most people. It might be like you're saying, you might be able to hand off some of these skills you're learning here to your children, right? Your kid creates a podcast, he creates these different businesses. All this information you have, you're kind of freely passing on to him. And if he wants to apply it in a different avenue or whatever, he now needs, okay, I need XYZ, I need profit and loss statements. So we're in a completely different world. And I think it's like that for each generation. But I think she's just most proud of me going to college, right? And it's pretty funny because like at home, she's here and she's like listening to me talk to clients and stuff like that. And she's like, you're really good at this.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
she's like, you're pretty smart.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's like full circle. It's like, she know I have a degree and I worked in New York and I'm doing this for years and whatever, but it's like, she's never heard me do it. So now that I'm actually working from home, and she's visiting, she can actually hear me talk to people and giving intricate knowledge and people are appreciative of the information I'm giving and things of that nature. So it's just it's funny. It's like, so maybe she's proud now too, because she's seeing that, but it's funny where she's like, it's funny, like she didn't know her son was smart, for lack of a better word. The way she's saying, it's like, oh, you actually know this, like,
yeah,
yeah. So it's very cool experience to be in a position where it's not just, there's always like check marks, like we say in Jiu Jitsu. There's belts to get, a blue belt. If you don't have a belt, you're a white belt. Okay.
Yeah.
Some people don't know that. So what belts you? I don't know. You're white.
Yeah. You just started. Good luck.
So there's white, blue, purple, brown, black. So there's belts that you get along the way. And someone just shared a meme, Joey from our heavyweight group, right? And we have a heavyweight group where we work out and do jiu-jitsu and different competition stuff, but it's hard to get heavyweights together. So he sent me a meme and he's saying when the purple belt who got his purple belt for attendance, because you technically, if you show up year after year, day after day in a jiu-jitsu gym, you are going to get belted, right? You may even have to take a test or something, but they're going to give you respect for sticking with it that long. Versus and that's a purple belt, versus someone who's lesser than him was the blue belt, and he got his blue belt by competing, going on a stage and showing that he can actually accomplish these moves in real life situations against someone that wants to actually hurt him. So there's a perspective here where it's like, I'm not going to say every time, but chances are that blue belt might be beating him in practice, right? We don't know if that's the case or not, right? He has his little tricks that he's always going to catch the blue belt because blue belt doesn't have all the knowledge, but maybe this guy's a little more hungry and will win those competitive matches, right?
Yeah.
So there's this stigma where it's like, I think just to answer that question, my mom is proud that I went to college, right? But it's like now she's becoming proud of the man I'm becoming. Like seeing me be a father, seeing me be a loving husband, seeing me like work and give people advice, like actually seeing the evolution of what that means not on paper, but in the person and how they're interacting. So I hope she is proud of me, and I think she is, right? But it's funny when I was going to fight, and I'm doing all the things fighters do. I'm trying to lose weight, to drop weight and stuff like that. So I normally walk around like 205. My fight's at 185. So big cut. I'm at 200 now. So I'm going to cut another 5 pounds and then like cut the last 10 pounds like right before the fight. So long story short, I was going over like my speech. They're probably not going to let me talk because I'm an amateur, but I'm going over my fight speech at the end. And something that really resonated with me is just saying, I hope you're proud of me, Mom. I love you, because as kids, I think we're all really trying to make our parents happy. Right. Yeah. It's like we grow up and we have wives and jobs and being pulled in a different, I want to make my coach proud, obviously, because he's teaching me the skills and things of that nature. And we have all these different places we want to impress, right? Just even your peers, right? Like, yeah, I won that fight. You want to impress yourself, but deep down inside, like the amount of work a parent does for a kid without expecting anything in return, a lot of times that love is hard to match. And because of that, I think most kids, when they recognize what your parents did for you, it's like, I just want to make you proud, Mom. I just want to, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I just hope that when you look at me, it brings a smile to your face, right? Whether I win or lose or whatever the case is, I want to win, obviously.
Right. I
think she'd be more proud if I won than if I lost. But, it's the point that, like, we're all trying to make those ones that gave onto us. I called it like someone pouring into you, right? So there's along our way, there's so many people like thinking that, thinking back on it, I had so many people were older than me, younger than me, and that's the best part when I realized that there's people younger than me that can teach me things as well. And I have like people in my gym that are like higher belt than me that are younger than me, and I have to respect them because they can submit me.
Right.
So it's like you realize in life sometimes that it's not what your belt is, but it's how you carry yourself, is what you give to the people around you, right? Those are the people that are hard to replace.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm someone that's hard to replace and someone that my mom's proud of.
That's awesome, man. I feel like we could talk for hours, but I know your time is valuable, and I got to get some dinner with the kids, and we got another podcast coming in, but I always like to finish with 2 questions. You got a lot going on, man. Thriving business, a lot of stuff you're building, this process that you're building to search for data with the world's most hated entity called the IRS. You've got your fight coming up. You got your kid's first birthday. You're working towards a purple belt. You got so many things going on. 2 questions for you. Like, what are you most looking forward to in this upcoming year in 2024? And then this is just a softball. What's your favorite movie and why? Because we got 150 episodes of people telling us their favorite movie and why. So favorite movie and thing you're most looking forward to in 2024.
The thing I'm most looking forward to is kind of sad. I want to say my daughter growing up, because that really just resonates, honestly. I have a fight coming up, so I've been looking forward to fighting for, so I'll say 2 things. I've been looking forward to fighting for, I've been training for 2 years now, and the goal has been to fight, To me, fighting is like, gladiator. Right. This is a place, I think there's laws like this in Boston as well, but normally you can't get into physical confrontation with someone and not get in trouble. And that's something I think our society is missing, right? Whereas like 2 people should mutually be able to say, I want to hurt you, and we not have to have legal repercussions after, right? If we're both willing to sign that waiver. And I think fighting and jiu-jitsu and things like that allow people to express that. And I think humans, not to compare us to dogs, but I've had like an Alaskan Malamute before, and this is a work dog. It pulls sleds. And that dog is a lot to deal with if you don't run him. But if you run him, he's the best dog in the world because he already got the energy out. So as humans, I think we need to get the energy out. That's why I'm so looking forward to fighting. And in addition to that, I'm also looking forward to my daughter and her growth, because it's been renewing just to watch. Like it's like, oh, I used to be on the stage.
Right.
Like she's over here like playing with things, trying to figure out her fingers. Like,
yeah.
So it's like such a joy to like just be a part of that and see it up close and realize that, she's learning at a rate that is way faster than I'm learning at this moment. And I'm thinking to myself, like, it's like encouraging to me, like, when did I lose that? Like, I need to get back to that point where I'm like just grabbing everything,
Yeah.
You show her something 3-4 times and she already knows what it is. Like,
yeah, that childlike wonderment of like just sucking it all in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like everything is new. I need to learn everything quick to catch up, right? And now we get, as adults, we're like kind of like, oh, like forget, I need to specialize my attention. So even in specialized attention, you can keep learning more. So that energy of just that endless learning is so amazing to watch. And I'm so lucky to see it. I can't wait for it to, there's big steps like walking and things like that. But it's just so funny just to see that slow development of her personality and like her like having her little like ways and things of that nature and trying to figure out what she's thinking. So I'm so interested in looking forward to just her growth in that. So those would be the 2 things I'm looking forward to next year. And then what was the other question?
Favorite movie and why?
So the favorite movie and why, what comes to mind is The Matrix, right? Probably just the first one.
Great.
Oh my God, man. This was like, so I will say this quote I heard online somewhere. No one is woke, right? People just have like woke activities. So the more like woke activities you do, like meditate or, exercise to actually sweat, there's certain things that happen to you on a like metabolic level, chemical level that I want to tap into, right? And The Matrix was kind of showing me that there is a side, they're living an entire world inside of their head, right? And we're all kind of living in our own heads, if you would, right? So, and not to put my tinfoil hat on, but there's no telling if we're in the Matrix right now, right?
Right.
Because our brains are so dynamic and so on and so forth, right? And some scientists would say that we are in a dimension of many and all these different types of things. So the Matrix was that first eye-opener to me, just being a kid and like not knowing anything about an experience outside of what I can see, hear, and touch. And they're creating this entire, dual world reality where it's like, they talked in so many points. One of the main points I really like about that movie was the people turning into the agents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think we live in like a society where it's like, and I'm going to talk about something a little controversial, not that we have to pick a side, but the vaccination and whether to get it or not, right? And we have a government telling us a certain narrative and maybe conspiracy theorists saying a completely different narrative, right? And it's like where you don't have to pick a side. You can kind of take some from here and some from there. And that's what I think most people are doing. But you're seeing a set of people that are becoming agents, for lack of a better word, where it's like, if the government tells me to jump off a bridge, I'm taking your hand and we're jumping, right?
Yeah, hard pass.
Yeah, hard pass. So I'm kind of giving you my stance without giving it. But long story short, it's like you realize that that person becomes an agent, right? Where if you're acting outside of the norm, right? That person we have something in America called citizen's arrest.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know the law, right? But if I think you're breaking it, I can arrest you.
Right.
Right. And you see a bunch of jiu-jitsu people arresting people, right? So street justice. The cops are coming, I got them. So we live in so that just kind of showed like where you are in the standpoint of like this big society and trying to fit into it. And not to take too much time, but The Matrix just really was like that first wake-up call where it's like, maybe there's more going on than I can see and touch. Let me just put it that way. So, and that was like the first, I think that movie was the first time I ever thought like existentially outside of myself and saying like, what is everyone else thinking?
Yeah. I love that, man. I got to tell you, I told Chris before you came over, I was a little worried when I don't know somebody personally. I'm like, I don't know, man. This podcast could be like a real stinking egg. Like we could just lay a bomb on this one for our first podcast in the new studio. But to the contrary, man, this has been a great conversation. I feel like we could seriously talk for hours. So with your permission, man, I got to have you back on later this summer when it's a little warmer in here. And we can, maybe we'll do like a fight commentary at some point. But man, I'm really looking forward to like developing our friendship, more time on the mat, having you back on the podcast. Thanks for being on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I rarely get a chance to speak openly about random topics like this. So it was cool just to have some spitfire back and forth with you. And it was fun. I would love to come back.
Cool, man. Thanks.